For invocation, we I'd like to have a moment of silence for, and I can't pronounce this name correctly, but the student that passed, our freshman student that passed away, Stephanie Gomez Humes. So please, a moment of silence for her, please, and her family. Amen. Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Mrs. Hall?
Here.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mr. Ryder?
Here.
Mr. Salazar?
Here.
Mrs. Thurston?
Here.
Mr. Ungary?
Here.
Chairman Cruzel?
Here. Thank you all again for being present. And so number 4, we added an item. Number 4, Superintendent EPS update. Mr. Dresser, please.
I can't hear, guys. I'm getting a repeat.
So could everybody mute?
I'm able to. Guy gave me control, so I can mute people as needed, Scott. If you need more, but it looks like I got everyone.
All right. Can you hear us now, Scott? Just put thumbs up if you can. Okay. Mr. Dresser, go ahead, please, and I will mute myself too.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I understand this meeting was supposed to be quick, just to approve 2 grants. But I asked the board chair if he could add just a quick update. That's kind of at the last moment, just because we knew that we often get a larger audience when we're on television, although we're meeting virtually today. And a couple of things have happened since break that I wanted to take this opportunity. I will follow up with communication on one item that I'm going to share with you this evening, but I wanted to take the opportunity while we had cameras and this information being shared on ETV. First off, I just want to recognize, as the chairman mentioned in the invocation, one of the worst part, no matter if it's a pandemic or having to close school down, still the worst part of this job for anybody is the loss of a student. And tragically, we lost an Enfield High School student last week. And I did not send anything out from the district out of respect for the family and for the privacy of the family. I know that Ms. Clark did send a communication home to families, and she has been working closely with the family. But I just wanted to let everyone make everyone aware that as a district and as a school, both at JFK, Whitney, and obviously Enfield High School, that supports are in place for any student that may need it. There's counseling supports, not just through the school counselors, but we've also teamed with Enfield Youth Services. So there are supports in place for any student that may need it. And really just on behalf of everyone on the district to send our thoughts and prayers with this young lady's family. As I said, there's no worse part of this job than having to make a statement like this. And all of our hearts are broken for her and for Stephanie and her family. I also wanted to bring the board up to date. I'm sure you're hearing a lot about vaccine distribution, and there was a meeting today. I still don't have any definitive information on when school staff will be able to be vaccinated. But at the present time, there was a meeting this afternoon where, as taking a step back, right now, groups 1A, which you've all heard about, are frontline healthcare workers. So that includes people working in hospitals or in congregate settings. They're still within that group 1A distribution plan. The next rollout is group 1B, where school staff have been included. We just don't know the level of priority that group 1B is going to have. There's multiple groups within 1B. There was supposed to be a meeting of the state's commission today to make some determinations on who will be first in line for the next phase of vaccination. I have not heard anything definitively at this point, but we're also optimistic that school staff will be included in the next round of vaccinations. I also have to address something that happened another unfortunate incident that happened over the break. And I wanted to take this opportunity because it's easier it comes across a little better than in an email or in a letter. And also apologize to anybody who was in receipt of a very offensive, vile, disgusting, heartbreaking, choose an adjective, email that was sent out late on a Sunday night over the break. I was made aware of it. I actually didn't receive the email myself. I was made aware by another staff member who had gotten it from a staff member at about 9:30 on a Sunday night. And my immediate call was to the police chief. And once I was able to contact the police chief, we realized in a very short period of time that this was going to become a larger issue than just a spam email being sent around. So I apologize for those who got a late message, but I thought it was important to at least send a message out to the community to let them know that A, we were aware of the message, and more importantly, B, it was in the hands of the Enfield Police Department and it was an active criminal investigation. I also have to take this opportunity to thank not just the police department for acting so quickly, but Guy, who's just an emoji on the screen right now, and our town IT staff, who worked not only at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, but through the night to try to not just identify where this email originated from, but to also work to have our system pull the email back from anyone who was in receipt of it. Again, this process isn't perfect, but these guys worked through the next several days trying to expunge that email from any account in the district that we possibly could. I also got a lot of questions from parents that evening. I got emails from parents that evening. I want to just explain why if I didn't respond to you, it wasn't that I was not taking your concerns seriously. But I just want to make it clear that once it was in the hands of the police department, it's an active criminal investigation. And anything that I say can either impede a criminal investigation or somehow alter the outcome if they find out who the ultimate perpetrator was. So I was very limited, and I still am very limited as to what I could say about the event, other than it was disgusting. And I also want to make everyone aware that in addition, for anyone who may have been in receipt of that, particularly kids, the district did make resources available for families and for kids that need any sort of counseling or any sort of advice on how to talk about this, what they may or may not have seen with their students. I can give a slight update on the case at this point, but before I do, I just want to put in perspective, because I did get a lot of questions from parents that said, you know, how could you let this happen, or things along those. And I understand the frustration, you know, and as a parent myself, I would be frustrated if my kids had gotten that. But the reality is there are bad actors out there. And no matter how good your security is, there's always people trying to breach that. And somebody put in perspective for me when we're talking about trying to track this one bad actor down, was you look at places like the US government or companies like Google and Facebook, or all of you have gotten emails from your credit card company that your information could have been compromised. Something on a large scale like that, it's those large places are pretty hard to defend. You can only imagine that even though it's our world, we are a small piece in the world, that penetrating the Enfield Public Schools network maybe not as difficult as it is, say, like the US Department of Treasury or the CIA. It's unfortunate. I'm not happy about it, but the reality is it happened, and we're doing the best we can to remedy what happened and to put procedures in place to try to ensure it'll never happen again. But the reality is that's not a promise that I can make. I just wish that people who put their minds to figuring this type of stuff out, if they put their mind to something good, the world would be a much better place. That said, I do have a statement that I can share with you from the police chief, because I know there's a lot of public information, a lot of public disclosure for this. While the case is subject to further action should additional investigatory leads present themselves, the immediate available leads have not proven fruitful and have pointed to an out-of-the-country offender. That's what I'm permitted to say. However, by the last phrase of out-of-the-country offender, at least puts our minds a little bit more at ease that this didn't originate in Enfield, Connecticut, as unfortunate as the whole process has been. So for anyone who was in receipt of this, I'm sorry. I was as disgusted by it as I'm sure all of you were. We do have resources in place for anybody who may need them if they had witnessed this or heard about it. But I think equally important is not necessarily being able to comment directly on where this originated and what we're going to do to try to stop it from a security standpoint, is what the vile nature of the message could have reignited. And I know, and ironically, we're about a year away, coming up upon the year anniversary where this board got together. And I know there's some new members. Well, this board made a commitment and took a public vote to enlist the help and the services of CABE to start working on what we call our equity framework or equity toolkit, to have some maybe uncomfortable, but much needed conversation about equity, inclusion, and race, not just in the Enfield Public Schools, but really in the community as a whole. And just to refresh those who may be watching at home, the reason that this particular program was appealing for me to recommend to the board is because we actually utilize an independent moderator through this process to actually facilitate conversations, not just with the 9 elected members of the board or the members of the town council or leadership within the district, but community members and anyone who's a part of the Enfield community. And having that independent person come in and really facilitate and make sure that we're having the conversations we need to have, and more importantly, we're making the change that we need to make as a community to make our community more inclusive and more welcoming. We understood at the time where you guys voted to do this, that this may be uncomfortable at times, but we all agreed, and I wholeheartedly agree that it's necessary. Unfortunately, the conversations never stopped, but the actual events and meetings and opportunities for us to gather and start facilitating these conversations, they were put on pause because we found ourselves in the beginning of a pandemic. And a lot of these initial conversations and community events that are structured around this program are really best met in that community forum where you can actually sit and have conversations face to face with people. And that just wasn't available to us over the past coming on 10 months. But in light of events that have taken place since we've had to put the physical part of this program on hold throughout the country and now in our own backyard, I think it's time that we reignite that conversation. So I wanted to inform you that I did reach out to Bob Rader, who's the executive director at CABE. We haven't been able to connect, but I'm hopeful to connect with him tomorrow about restarting that conversation and jumpstarting our work here in Enfield that we had committed to about a year ago. So with the board's blessing or approval, you've already voted on it, so you've kind of already locked yourselves in. But my recommendation is I'd like to talk to Mr. Rader first and find out their availability. And I know Ms. Williams was going to be our facilitator, and I'm hoping she's still available. But I'm going to try to have that conversation in the next day or so. And my recommendation would probably be to have at least board leadership meet with, even if it has to be done virtually at this point in time, to start reigniting that program, because I think enough time has passed where this is work that's too important that we need to do as a community. So without objection, I'm going to move that forward. I will be in contact with the chair and leadership if there is availability through our colleagues at CABE. And I don't know what the structure is going to be like in this virtual world if we're able to start having meetings again in person. But I think, reigniting those conversations is overdue, but I think it's more important now than ever. So I'm going to move forward with that. And if any board member has any questions about that after the meeting, you certainly can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to discuss. But I think at this point in time, it's in the best interest of everybody, not just those of us on the screen, but everyone in this community to start that conversation now. I say I don't know what the world's going to look like, especially when it comes to in-person meetings over the next, month or two. And I say that because part of the decision that I'm going to share with you now, I wasn't sure I was going to be in a position to do that because over the break, I was given some information that, quite honestly, the numbers in the transmission of the virus in our area was relatively high. What I've learned over the past few days, that if those of you who are watching that are used to me putting up numbers on a screen and talking about cases per 100,000 residents and all that stuff, I'm not trying to be cute with any of this. Throw it out the window. Nothing personal. I'm not doing it anymore because no one's using those figures any longer. All of the metrics that we've been making decisions based off of Those are not the recommendations any longer. The recommendations at this point are try to get your kids back in school if you can. And to be quite honest, what's prohibited us from doing that, consistently over the past 6 months has been the amount of staff that we had absent for having to quarantine either for themselves or becoming direct contacts with people. So there's a couple of things that are going to change. First off, when it comes to quarantining, the CDC has changed their guidance on quarantining, going from 14 days to 10. And I've worked in conjunction with our local director of public health, and she's agreed that as a district, when we have to go through the quarantining measures, that we can now do that on a 10-day basis as opposed to a 14-day basis like we had in the past. So that will help, especially when we're looking at availability of staff. We're getting 4 more days that we don't have to send people home for. Now, you still have to take mitigation measures, but we will send that out to staff, in the coming days. But we wanted to at least get that out publicly so people at home will know that if they are contacted that they have to quarantine, they're now going to be told 10 days as opposed to 14 days if they were contacted previously to this. But that's all based upon the CDC changing the guidelines, the State Department of Health adopting the guidelines, and our local health department endorsing the guidelines. I want to apologize to our staff members who are watching this, who are going to see a clip on Facebook saying, "He said what?" Because what I usually like to do is before I make any announcements, I email the entire district so they can hear it from me before they hear about it on Facebook or on TV. I did not do that today because, to be quite fair to the 8 of you, I didn't want to tell anybody what I was about to do before you guys had an opportunity to hear it. So everyone's hearing this at the same time, with the exception of some of our administrators. But I know everybody's wondering what we're going to do come Monday because our current phase of being on remote learning is going to end. So I'm going to go through what the plan is, and it's going to seem a little strange and it's going to seem a little creative, but I will explain in the end as to why. And there are reasons why I've decided to do it this way. So starting on Monday, January 11th, we're going to reinstitute our hybrid model, just like we have up until this point to the recent holiday break. So the hybrid model is going to be cohort A goes Mondays and Tuesdays, cohort B goes Thursdays and Fridays. Wednesdays will remain remote with asynchronous instruction. That will take place for the entire month of January. So from January 11th till January 29th, we will remain in the original hybrid plan. And I'll explain to you in a moment why. Beginning on Monday, February 1st, and ironically, the next 2 first of the months are Monday, so that worked out to our benefit. But effective Monday, February 1st, we're going to transition to what I'm going to refer to as a 3-2 hybrid. And I'm saying that because I've made a commitment that I was going to phase kids back in as opposed to just clipping a switch and saying we're starting up on Monday. The reality is, and I'll get into it, the logistics of bringing all our kids back at once is not feasible at this time. The other reason is we're still in a time in January and the beginning of February where the health data is saying that's going to be we're not out of the woods until the beginning of February. So a lot of that is still based on that recommendation. But beginning February 1st, if you are cohort A, that first week, you will go in-person learning on Monday the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Cohort B will then go on in-person on Thursday and Friday. And then in theory, we will flip-flop. The following week, cohort B would go 3 days, cohort A would go 2 days. It gets a little confusing because we have scheduled off days with no school. So if you'll just oblige me for one moment, I will actually read the dates off so people, and this will all go out in a communication, but so that people are watching. It's going to sound a little nutty, but I'll explain to you why. So if you're in cohort A, you would go in person on February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Cohort B would go in person February 4th and February 5th. On February 8th, cohort A would be in person on Monday the 8th and Tuesday the 9th. On February 10th, that Wednesday, cohort B would then be in person for Wednesday the 10th and Thursday the 11th. On Friday the 12th, school is closed for professional development. On the 15th is President's Day, and 16th, there's no school for professional development. That's our abbreviated February break that we have every year. I'm not canceling that. I think between everything that everyone's going through, those days need to be protected for our kids to have a little bit of a break, whether it's in person or on a screen. And I'm trying everything I can to protect those days. That said, students will return on February 17th. Cohort A would return in person on Wednesday, February 17th. And then on Thursday, the 18th and Friday, the 19th, Cohort B would be in person. Then the following week, the last week of February, February 22nd, on Monday, Tuesday the 23rd, Wednesday the 24th, Cohort A would be in person. And then Thursday the 25th and Friday the 26th, Cohort B would be in person. That seems nutty because there are short weeks built in there, but the rationale behind that is that what I just explained, starting on January 11th on our hybrid, and then doing the abbreviated phase-in hybrid for the month of February, students in Cohort A will have 14 days of in-person learning. Students in Cohort B, during that time frame, will also have 14 days of in-person learning. That gets us to the end of February. Assuming nothing changes in the world and there's more different strain that hits somewhere else or whatever else we're prepared to deal with, assuming everything goes as we expect and are being told it should, and we get through the rough months of January and February, my intention is on Monday, March 1st, to return all pre-K through 5 students back to school 5 days a week. Before you ask, students in grades 6 through 12 is to be determined. The reason for that is because we don't know if we can fit all of our kids at JFK and at the high school back 5 days a week if every student decided to return to in-person learning 5 days a week. We know we can deal with that capacity at the elementary level. We're not sure we can deal with that at JFK because of construction and because of the amount of students at Enfield High School. Because keep in mind, even though we're returning 5 days a week, we still have to keep the social distancing guidelines in place. And if we pack 1,600 kids into Enfield High School, we can't do that. I also have to remind you that students who are remote learners now will continue to have that option for the remainder of the school year. So in reality, we don't know how many people are actually going to take us up on our availability to come back 5 days a week. At the high school, obviously, it's less attended in person now than our other schools. I don't know if that's going to change. My gut and personal experience having a senior in high school in my house is they're not coming back unless I force them to. They're pretty happy with the remote situation that they're dealing with right now, especially if you've already been accepted to college. That said, what I'm going to do in the time being is prior to that date, we are going to reach out to the families of JFK students and the families of Enfield High students and ask, if we are able to open up 5 days a week, will you commit to sending your child 5 days a week? With no promises that we'll be able to do that. Because the reality is if everybody replies back and says yes, then we're probably not going to be able to do it. But if enough people still opt for remote learning, we may have the opportunity to allow students who want to come back 5 days a week the opportunity to do that. What I am going to do, regardless of if we stay at the secondary level in that hybrid program or not, students, special needs students, and our English language learners are going to have the opportunity to come back 5 days a week if they choose. And there's a couple of reasons why March 1st is on the forefront of my head right now, and it has been for quite some time. The reality is, folks, when we hit March, we've been doing this for a year. And I understand that there are certain people who aren't going to like this plan, and there are certain people who are going to like it. It's going to either not be enough for some or too much for others. And I know there's still a high level of anxiety out there of wondering, especially with staff, about bringing all of our kids back into school at one time. I can't get past that our kids for a year have been living in this world. So we have tried, and nothing has changed from my priority as far as the health and safety of our kids and our staff members. But I also have to take into consideration that our kids have been dealing with these circumstances for a year. And if we can attempt to get them back in some sense of normalcy, back in some cases every day, particularly our youngest learners and our kids with special needs and our kids with English as a second language. Those are the kids that really would benefit the most of having that in person. All of our kids benefit by having in-person time. But those are the kids that were always the highest priority. If we're able to go back on a more regular basis, we would start with that. I would love to bring everybody back 5 days a week. I don't know if it's feasible at the high school and at JFK right now. We're going to try. We're going to ask people if they're willing and interested in doing it. And that data is going to determine whether we can do it. But I want to be upfront about it. And I'm sure people will say, yes, they want their child to go 5 days a week. And if I have to tell them they can't, they're not going to be happy with me. Understood. I wish the circumstances were different. But the reality is that gives us about a month and a half logistically to get ready for it. If I were to come out here and tell you today that starting, January 25th, we're going to bring all our kids back 5 days a week, the reality is we can't do it. Not because we can't fit, but you have to remember when we started this process back in the summer, in order to make the rooms accommodate the social distancing guidelines, we had to remove a whole bunch of stuff, including desks, because we were only bringing kids back in cohorts. We didn't have to have 20 desks in the classroom. We were able to bring hypothetically 10 and space them out better. Now we know we could fit the 20 desks if we remove other items from the building, but I have to give the principals and our buildings and ground staff time to logistically set these buildings up to accept all of our kids again. And I've said from the beginning, my priority is trying to get our younger learners in because those are the kids that are having the biggest impact by working remotely. So right now, that's the plan. By March 1st, I think we're all hopeful that a lot of us will be vaccinated by then. And we won't have that worry of, I can't protect everybody, but I would feel a lot better knowing that if we're going to ask staff members to be in a classroom full of kids all day and they've already been vaccinated, that at least the exposure level for our staff members is not there. Not to say I want kids to transmit it any more than adults. I'm not saying that, but that gives us also peace of mind knowing that if that gives us enough time through this vaccination process to offer for those who want it and are willing to take it, to afford them the protections that if they are in contact with more kids than they're used to, that they at least have that peace of mind that they have that level of protection. Some positive news on the vaccine. The one group that is included in group 1A are our school nurses. And the majority of our school nurses have already received their first vaccination dose. Right now it's voluntary, but the vast majority of them volunteered to take it. And I got a notice during the break that there was enough vaccine for our nurses if they wanted it. And I reached out to Trish Veda, and within 24 hours, anyone who wanted the shot got it. So that gives me a little bit of hope that as we start rolling out and there's more vaccination available, the more staff members that are interested and willing to take it gives that layer of protection where we can start to at least the best we can get these kids the most sense of normalcy we can for the circumstances we're dealing with. So I wasn't going to do this tonight, but I knew that we had cameras on, and rather than sending all this in, once I started looking at the calendar, I said, there's no way I can just explain this in a letter because it is kind of crazy. But the purpose behind doing the days that I did was I wanted to make it equitable for everyone, specifically getting us through January and February, which is still the concern with the level of infection throughout the community in the area. I mean, look, I haven't seen today's numbers. I've been on calls all day, but if we want to go back to the numbers, in reality, we shut down the week after Thanksgiving. We brought everybody back. We knew there was going to be a Thanksgiving surge. There was, and we made it a week. We're doing the same thing now. We all know people who traveled for the holidays, who gathered and still went to family events for the holidays, who may have done something on New Year's Eve. I don't know what to expect. The good news is we've been off for 2.5 weeks, so at least people who were in quarantine are out, and we can start with a clean slate and hope that maybe that that anticipated holiday surge doesn't hit us that bad. But we have to start putting a plan in place to get back to where we need to go. The good news is, and I promise I will end with this, we've all been through hell the last year, no more so than our kids. So we owe it to them and all of us to try to give them the light at the end of the tunnel. So I can't promise that this is going to work. Something can happen tomorrow that can throw this a monkey wrench in this whole entire plan. But what the realization hit me, and Andy and I had this conversation, over the break. It's been a year that we've been in turmoil, and I know, we're trying to find that balance of protecting everybody, but at some point we know that we've got these kids need to get back into their routine as best as we can, and buying us a little time to do it right. I think we've been cautious, but I think we've done it right, and that's just my opinion. And I'm sure there's others who have varying opinions on that. But this at least gives us a plan to get back to as close a sense of normalcy as we can. And if there's any adjustments that have to be made along the way, we're certainly used to doing that. But that's it. I will send this out at some point. I'm not going to send it out tonight because I don't know how to word all of this with the dates at the moment. But in the next day or so, this will formally go out. But I think as long as people know, Monday's back to our old normal, which is the regular hybrid, but we've got about a month till we start transitioning to the new phase in. And then with any luck, we'll all keep our fingers crossed. If we make this plan, that means brighter days are ahead, and we're hopefully getting past this. So that was all I had for you this evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for adding that to the agenda. But as I said, I want to take advantage of the amount of people who might actually be tuning into this, as opposed to the people who don't want to read an email or a letter from me. I know it's not necessarily part of the agenda, but I don't know Robert's rules, but if there's any questions I can answer, I guess I can try.
Well, just so you know, there was 252 people was the max watching, so that's great that we do have watchers out there. I think we should put off questions, though, if you have any. We do have a meeting next Tuesday. So I think, just think, or just email him whatever questions and we can answer them next Tuesday. But I guess this was just to spell it out and stay tuned. But the important thing is we're going back to hybrid next Monday. So let's leave it at that. So under new business, 5A, approved Board of BOE special virtual meeting, December 22nd meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Hall, seconded by Ms. Thurston. Any discussion, changes? All in favor, raise your hand, and the two on the phone, just say aye.
They're muted.
They're muted.
Aye.
All right, we got
Aye.
aye. We got aye. So we got 8 in favor, 0 against. And 5B, approval of BOE regular meeting minutes of December 8th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms.
Second.
Hall, seconded by Ms. Thurston. Any discussion?
Aye.
All in favor? I got an
Aye.
aye from Bill,
Aye.
and I got an aye from John. So 8 in favor, 0 against. So with that, just want to say Happy New Year, and we'll have our regular meeting next Tuesday in council chambers at 7 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Ms. Thurston, seconded by Mr. LeBlanc. Any discussion? All in favor? We are adjourned. Happy New Year. Thank you all for attending. And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you.